Good morning, friends. This is my 187th video. Now again, this is under the same series. I'll be covering Kamptee cantonment. Now what is this cantonment? It's a very travesty in this cantonment, which Mr. Vahal used to discuss with me during his period and in his court case, which in the coming days I'll be exhibiting in my video. Mr. Vahal kept insisting on a notification that Kamptee was always a part of Madras presidency. When, under what notification it moved to Bengal or Bombay presidency is a great matter of evidence. Now here also this letter was given to me by Mr. Harshwal, son of Mr. T. Wal. A great man is no more. And here it is most interesting. I don't have the history of cantonment, I must admit it. But there is a CEO who has Mr. Mane Amit Kumar B, who in a response to some letter of Mr. Vahal has written about some facts. So let's read those facts. What he's written on his page. It's a matter of evidence. Please friends, this is a very important letter. So first para, he talks of rights over control on lands. Rights and interest in lands in various parts of the earth from time to time were not ordained. And at the creation of wealth, so he's very right, when territories came to be under control of rule or societies, what was prescribed by controlling authorities came to be recognized and enforceable as rights and interests of various persons from time to in the land falling in the territory. Such rights and interests in the same lands have changed with conquest and battle. Now here he plays the typical Indiiess officer. By conquest, you take away the sovereignty of the king, but the Akbari system and whatever the Mughal periods or even the Mauryas or the Kashpa periods, I'm talking of 1400, I can read it. Lands were belonging to the tillers, and the Akbari system even started collecting revenue in form of 1/3 of the produce, which the Britishers imbibed. So here this last line is a typical government officer's line. Now evolution of presidencies and land. Now he talks of a date 31st June 1600. There was a charter bill which was produced to the Queen of England in England, and an association of merchants called the later, which we all understand as East India Company. At that time it was called the East Indies Company. They were given the right to go explore the East and do business there. So finally in 1613, the first factory was established in Gujarat, Surat. Gradually the company extended towards the islands of Bombay. Later it conquered, again he says, which is a real true false statement, and brought in Bombay presidency into the British India. Absolutely wrong. With these establishments of the factory at Metropolitan in 1611 and expanding the activities and building a fort in Madras in 1639, which laid the foundations of Madras presidency. The dates are clear, but how did Madras presidency actually went from the French to the British? It's a matter of evidence. So finally, even he talks of Bengal presidency was created. So what I am gathering through these lines and paras of is that the cantonment of the Ministry of Defence through this letter is admitting that there were 3 presidencies in this country: Bombay, Madras and Bengal. That's the evidence here. Now he says the Diwani rights in Bihar and Orissa were achieved in 1764. How many years later? More than 100 years later. 1600 the Britishers started, 1639 they created Bombay Presidency, finally Madras and then Bengal. But when did they get the Diwani from the rulers? That was in 1764. Now here he uses the company defeated Mr. Qasim at the Battle of Buxar. See, war and defeats by the 1600 charter were all there. I don't deny those things. The Britishers were playing their games. Clive followed by Hastings, governor 1765, 1772. Finally, the presidency were controlled by East India Company. Very good evidence. On 17th May 1773, Parliament of England adopted a resolution that all acquisitions made under the influence of military force or by a treaty with foreign princes do of right belongs to the state. What is this act? This is the Charter Act of 1773. It says all conquest, all war lands taken through that stand finished. Now, any land, whether you say you have won through the Battle of Buxar or any other, these lands will be held by the Rajas itself, and the British government or the officer here, the East India companies, will get into treaties with these Rajas. Thus, all lands that came into the possession of East India Company and later colonial government by conquest, appropriation, perpetually, leases or are acquisitions or acquisition it should be to the recognized as the property of government through this act by an act of parliament. Two things. Charter Act restricted no conquest, no war, 1773. Prior to that, any war created, the Britishers didn't get any land. They didn't inherited a Raja and they said now we are the rulers. They became the rulers in 1764, and that also they just got the Diwani. Now what does this mean? I'll explain you in another video. This is called that these Britishers took not the complete sovereignty from the Raja. They just took away 3 powers from the Raja. Rest, the Riyasat or the Raja was not dethroned, he was the Raja. That's it. So regulating the Act of 1773, England further gave powers gradually. It was that now there will be a government in place of East Indies companies, and all ordinances and regulations to administer these territories, because these 3 powers in the sovereignty had come to the British. Power to make rules, power to war, power to external, that is war, and then power to collect revenue, and within this I would club these first and third, and the Chaukidari Act or the policing. What was left with the Raja? Just sit at his throne and have fun. So gradually these Diwani was shifted from 1773 till 1793. I've been in all my videos saying this. Good enough, we agreed to him. Lands and houses in cantonment. In exercise of such powers, general orders were issued by the government to the presidencies regulating various occupation of land and houses in cantonments. So that means in 1773 or 1793, all cantonments were made. Whether this officer is not too well read or he is superbly read, I am surprised if he is vetted this letter through the ministry law section or not. But this is now a piece of evidence. What does he say? Cantonments where army was located, and later under had been brought under the control of the company. I don't know what he is trying to say. Just trying to read it. The policy of the company was to create infrastructure for state visa-wise bungalows for offices, shops, houses, for followers and the users at the user's cost. So now we must understand how England operates. Even today, 10 Downing Street, which is the Prime Minister's house, is not owned by the Government of England. So Government of England, because of the size of that country, does not believe in owning land. It says there can be two owners of the same land. You can be the owner of the land, but you are not the owner of the built up estate there. You get that? This is very important to understand. So they bifurcated this ownership. You can be the owner of the land, but you are not the owner of the built up house. So what am I trying to say? Who's the complete sovereign owner of the land? Is the man who owns the land. Now I own the building. So I am a landlord. I am an owner in professional. But I am not a true owner, because the true owner is the landowner. So these are two separate identities, and this is how, with the mindset, these British officers worked in India. And with this intentions, lands were allotted to individual officers. Now he is using the word individual officers. Who were these officers in 1794, or let's put it till 1860? Let's go down till 1861 when the Indian Council Act came in. Who were these officers who were allotted lands? British officers. All were military in 99%. There was no IFS or IAS, no Indian Foreign Services or administrative services were there in India. So these were basically all lieutenants, colonels. There was not even a brigadier. So these were all the premier officers of the British Army. So they were given these lands. And the condition was that the land would remain the property of the government and could be resumed. Typical line. That's how the Britishers in all of its GGO has been saying. So British officers, when were leaving these lands, when India was getting independent, they sold it, he says, to the natives. Order pertains to occupancy rights were issued by government central and council for respective presidencies with one common aspect. The occupancy holder is the owner of the bungalow only, and the land is renewable. Now here he forgets that in the Land Revenue Act, the word occupancy holder or holder of occupancy right has been defined as a proprietor. This is where the problem is. Most of our advocates prior to 1947, I don't blame anybody, because we didn't have photocopies, we didn't have so much of reading. How many people were educated prior to that? And who could fight with the British? Nobody could. But after 1947, or let's say 57, when the Constitution came in, people unable to vet these words. After Regulating Act of 1773 for governing the Indian territory, Government of India Act 1833 was made. Absolutely right. Further, he calls that to govern these cantonments, they were at subsequent stages, Government of India Act 1858, 1919, which is wrong, it is 1915, and then 1935, which was the last Government of India Act, in which Baba Sahib Ambedkar was also a nominee and a party to the constitution of the council. So finally 1947, and then the constitution. Now he speaks of the same Governor General Order 12 September 19, instead of writing 1836 he writes 1936. So these are some technical errors. Government of India Act 1859, this act needs to be given by him, to 1935 in principle embodied in section 24 General Clauses Act 1897. Absolutely right. There was a mistake done in 1915 Act, which was rectified in section 31 or 30 of the 1935 Government of India Act. So these things I don't deny, and we keep going that we were always brought under the central pool, because earlier there were no states during 1947 and prior. So we were always put under the British government. Let's presume it, that cantonments were lands belonging to the British government. So there was no state government at that time. Na? There was no Haryana, no Punjab or Himachal or Uttarakhand. So there was no question of land is whether a state subject or land is whether a central subject. So under the 1935 charter, what were we done? We were put under the central pool. Cantonments went under the central pool because of the 1935 Act. Now he says, cantonments or military cantonments wherein no private interest in land excluding building, a new meaning acquired with the introduction of municipal administration and enactment of Cantonment Act 1889. Rightly, this encompassed a local area which could have government and private lands for the purpose of cantonment administration. Cantonment with nearby incorporated areas, there could be and there really are private lands. Earlier to 1889, no private land was included within the limits as per GGO Governor General Order of 30th October 1832. I am unable to dig into this. Even Vinay Maitra's book has not said. So this CEO must be asked in Kamptee, which is this Governor General Order of 1832? Is he referring to the 1833 GGO order, or is he referring to some order which the ministry or the present Indiiess team has created? All earlier orders, declarations, rules and regulations, directions, licenses, permits, grants given were deemed to be given and imposed under Act 1889. I'm surprised, this officer, he doesn't know that the first act of cantonment was made in 1864. And he comes up harping down to 1889. Then there was another act made. Why should I share it with him? Let's see. And I gave a briefing in the Ministry of Defence. But these young officers were not there at that time in 2012-13. Introduction of Cantonment Code 1899, notified by so-and-so. Now here also he speaks wrong. It was notified for all the 4 presidencies. Punjab was not a presidency but was a commissionerate. A lieutenant general used to set up. It was notified for all these 4 independent presidencies. Provided for registers of land. Now he says prior to 1899, there were no registers of lands being maintained in these cantonments. So he is diminishing the 1833 Governor General Order, which speaks of a house property register, and I have those house property register. My young CEO friend, you can always take it from me if you want it. So the government and the department is living in some fool's paradise, Then he says 1912 Cantonment Code came, finally 1910 Act, then he talks of 1924 Cantonment Act, then he talks of CLA rules, all immaterial. So coming to these submissions, 2-3 points, but he said very good, which are very good for us, and we can definitely make use of them. Now this letter in the beginning part proves a lot of evidence for us. Now how we can use this evidence is for us to make, and we should have supportive evidence to counter what he is saying. Now he talks of Kamptee, and because this letter was related to some bungalows in Kamptee, and now he talks of Kamptee. So here he is talking of a property and those land records, GLRs, when it was and how. So management of lands, British era, he again repeats those old small things from 1773, doesn't go to 1600 this time. And he finally says how A1, B1, B2 or C3 or whatever these lands were classified. But the worst part is, here he makes a statement that there was a resolution on 10th May 1773 that all acquisitions made under the influence of military force or by treaty with foreign princes do of right belong to state. Regulations, Governor General orders of the presidencies of Madras, Bengal, Bombay are administered by East India Company and were applicable to whole of India which were under the control of the company. Believe me, sometimes I find these people so funny. 1773, these were three independent armies, presidencies. And the amalgamation took way back later in 1887 with the Queen's order. If he wants it, I can share it with him. But here he speaks of that the military station Kamptee came into existence in 1821. Now, how does he refer to this date? Now, he is talking of a gazetteer of Maharashtra, 1966. Much later than independence. Or is he talking of 1866 gazetteer? I don't have this. There is a plan which was made in this gazetteer of 1858 and in 1888, cantonment which presumed to be under the presidency of Madras administered by East India Company. Please, Kamptee bungalow owners, Mr. Wahal could not lay hands on this gazetteer. I kept asking him at that time. Lay your hands on this 1866 gazetteer of Maharashtra or Nagpur or whatever. It is incorrect to say that sale deeds respective to so and so, cantonment code, journal plans. I'm not naming the properties here. So again he is missing. He says where straightaway he goes to the 1912 code. Now 1999 as well as the 1912 code said there has to be a register which is of private properties. There has to be a register where all government leases. There has to be a register where all government grants have to be registered. There has to be a register where all sale proceeds and mutations have to be registered. So these are four separate registers which have to be maintained. But the government is willing to give us only 266. Why? Because that talks of government lands on leases. My is an old grand bungalow. How am I being maintained in 266? We'll talk of class A lands, class B lands and C. But the bigger point is land in category 1 may be either active occupation, this. In 3 he says land retained in government so and so and so. Land in category 2 is the land which is required for local public purpose of municipal nature such as streets, hospital, rubbish, departments and etc. This is the catch. Land in category 3 is private land as which neither the government nor the cantonment board possesses any proprietary rights. In view of the above para, it is submitted that bungalows come under category 2. Who told you this? Category 2 also says private lands and then you put us under section B3. Guys, please don't admit we are category 2 or B3 lands. We are category 3 lands. Now he says specifically in para 1954 of the CLA rules he talks. Now I'll read this 202 page. This is Army Regulations India 1887, grants, general rules, Bengal and Bombay. This is very important. This 1887 is for Bengal and Bombay. The limits of cantonments or bazaar shall be marked by the local magistrate or political agent and commanding officer in conjunction. in marking out the limits of a new cantonment, private property is not to be included therein. Do you get something? Let's see how many people understand what I just read. I know most of you don't understand. Because I sometimes get very surprised that people don't question back. People don't watch my videos and make notes. They feel as if, I'm doing some charity free for them. They watch it and they go on. And then the next time if we have a problem, we'll call Mr. Das. We have his number. Understand, educate yourself. That is why I'm making these videos. I'm not advertising myself on these videos. These are educative videos. Okay. So, however, because we were not category 1, we were not category 3, we were category 2, which you decided, that is the British or the IDS officers. So, we are now government lands, and after 1887, no cantonment could have had boundary pillars, including private lands. I'll counter this with an evidence. So, again this establishment and this everything comes. Now, what I just said, 266, general plan in the cantonment code. Again, he verifies. All lands which does not belong to the government and all houses situated thereon, there was no system for maintenance of land records for lands within cantonments prior to 1899. Does not hold good in view of GGO 179 of 1836, as which is prior to the cantonment code. So, we have a beautiful admission by an executive officer that there were no land records prior to 1899. So, if we produce a register prior to 1809, we produce a sale deed prior to 1899. What are we? Decide. This is where you people have to decide. And if you people can decide, I'll be the happiest person. Now, where is it written? He talks of a GGO 1 for, this is on 1833. I'll read this for you. This is on the Governor General Order 1833, passed on 16th September. The Commander-in-Chief is pleased to direct that a register shall be kept in the office of the Principal Staff Officer at the stations of Dum Dum, Barakpur, Dinapur, Banaras, Kanpur, Agra, Meerut and Karnal of the sale or transfer of any house, bungalows or gardens within the limits of these cantonments, and in order that these register may be as complete as possible, the present proprietor of houses, etc., will send to the different staff officer a memorandum stating when they were purchased or became proprietors of them, from whom they obtained them, and the dimensions of their different compounds. In future, when any house or piece of ground within the cantonment above mentioned may be sold or transferred, the person who makes the transfer will report the circumstances for the officer commanding information and for entry in this register. Now, who's right? Is this officer right that prior to 1899 no register was being maintained, or is the Governor General Order right that there was a register being maintained? And it was told, in this very book it is written, it has not to be destroyed. So, friends, these kind of letters come, they go, and you can use them as evidence. That is why I say get your Janampatris made. That is why I say collect your evidence. And evidence can be only collected, it's a very simple rule. It's a very simple rule. Wherever there is a happening, evidence is going to be around it. Let's say if there is a murder which has happened in this office, So the blood stains, the weapon, or any indiscriminating, we want DNA reports, hair samples, cloth samples, will be available in and around. So within Kamptee, do it. Why can't you guys do it? I'll read one very important para in this. It needs to be mentioned that no records, since defense land within cantonments are available with the revenue departments. All records of lands within cantonment in respect of government land, irrespectively of land of central government to oblique state government, are maintained in the GLR register. That means when the GLR was not existing, there was no revenue record of these cantonments. What is this officer trying to say? One, also the record of map specify defense land, but no records are available with their state department of the state government. All defense land records are maintained through GLR register of the state department through the respective military defense state office. So what is it? This is a very important para. How many people understood? Please, I would love if you raise your hand or make a note on it. Question me back on this and I'll brief you on this para. This is such a beautiful piece of evidence for court. So guys, we just have to read through these things. And Kamptee people, this letter which was shared by Mr. Wahal is beautiful. And let's try and make use of this letter and move forward. What I have been saying, what is my GLR saying? I am an old grant. What is this officer saying? 1773, 1600, 1794. That order clearly says that all old grants have to be converted into new grants. He doesn't read that. That's the problem. You know, when I was doing my presentation in the DG's office in 2012, I yet remember, and I think most of the people who've seen those videos, the then DG very clearly said that, Mr. Das, if I ask anybody in my staff with all the resources to do so much of extensive work and research, will not be able to do. And I'm ashamed. This is that letter. I'm ashamed of such letters, written by departmental officers. I'm not against my government, my country, or my men in uniform, but I'm definitely against to people who break the laws. When we were gulams or slaves, I could understand what my predecessors could never do it, but not now. Believe me, get in touch. We are old grants, never converted into new grants. Thank you.